I didn't prepare remarks for tonight. I have 4 bullet points, but this is kind of good because I presented today political campaigning in San Francisco, lessons learned by a rookie. Uh, and I hope it's not too elementary for you. Some of the, I've been a fourth generation San Franciscan, 35 years in the police department. I have, seen the political apparatus in this town for a long time. But this recall and the Prop K issue was an experience of many things that were a first instance to me. And I think that the recall itself is foundational for any sort of later uh, purposeful mobilization of West Side folks in terms of standing up for the West Side and for other communities on aligned issues. But let me just jump in. So in June of 2024, I got a call from a reporter. I was in Palm Springs, and he told me this thing that would become Prop K had just gone to the Board of Supervisors, and was I going to get involved? And I said I'd rather drive a knitting needle through my ear and pull it out the other side of my head. And however, within an hour, I was on the phone with a few folks and agreed to take a tactical role in Prop K, meaning that I went around and debated with, the first debate, Connie was there, Joel, Lucas Lux, and then for months debated Lucas Lux and other players in the sort of, uh, neo-urbanist folks behind Prop K. I can tell you that I was honest the entire time, and I found myself in a snake pit of half-truths over and over and over again. We're not terribly organized and didn't do any campaigning basically east of Twin Peaks. And of course, we know Prop K lost. Now, with regard to Joel Engardio, I'm convinced that he actually recalled himself. It just took people to get together in and go through the machinations of perfecting a recall process. And so, how does one do that when you've never had a campaign finance experience or disclosure experience? I've attended watch parties for Sandra, but never attended one that I was such a stakeholder and so many other folks here, Sandra and certainly Lisa and Albert. Uh, anyway, so two of us started out in the beginning. We consulted, a campaign law firm. How do you get this started? The rules are arcane. You need a 200-word statement, and you need 80 signatures from the district to begin the process. So how do you get 80 signatures? Well, we put a sign up on Facebook. We were going to be at Starbucks for 2 hours. And within the first hour, 80 people arrived and signed this petition. Of course, then it had to be formatted and a bunch of other stuff. And at that point, the lawyers were charging $600 an hour, and we hadn't raised a nickel. So here's a lesson. This stuff is hugely expensive. And so we then had to retain a company that handles disclosures, bookkeeping, FPPC compliance, set up a website to receive donations. They take a cut of everything that comes in. The rules are complicated and easy to make a mistake, and the opponents are ready to pounce on you at any time with complaints to get the news media flash, even though they're minor complaints. So anyway, I'm going to kind of move quickly because you're a more sophisticated audience, more experienced audience. But the so it's really expensive. We ended up getting a campaign firm, some young folks. They were running $5,000 a month apiece. We then started canvassing. Want to know the truth? I didn't know what canvassing was when they said we were going to have our first canvassing. And it was a very cool event. We set up a table inside of a park, and within an hour, someone complained to Park and Rec that we were using Park and Rec property without a permit. So we had to pick up the table and move it onto the sidewalk. The funny thing to me was, you mobilize before you canvas. Canvas is door knocking, texting, phone banking, digital outreach. But the Joel's, and when I say he recalled himself, I think he both did it by his behavior in office and by I don't think he had good advice either by his campaign, by his staff in City Hall, which he rotated a lot of folks out and brought in ideologues that I think created an echo chamber of input. But also the campaign team, something I thought was really curious. Their campaign manager, this young woman, Leanne, I think her name is, who on Facebook describes herself as she's basically like a tricky person that studies public documents and proprietary information, sort of like a spy, right? This is his campaign manager. She she came to our first mobilization and pretended that she was a volunteer and took the literature, photographed us all, stayed for the talking points. And at some point, someone said to me, "Hey, that woman is behaving very strangely. She's, collecting everything and taking pictures." So I went up and I guess it was the cop in me. I asked her a couple of questions. I knew she wouldn't have time to think of a lie. So I asked her where she went to college, and she told me. And I asked her one more question. And this allowed us to find her on LinkedIn and see that she was the campaign manager. The irony is, I don't know why you would come out and study the newest, dumbest people in the campaign world to somehow use that as your intelligence to structure your campaign. And I think for a couple of months, they just followed what we were doing. They, set up where we set up, and if we had an event, they had an event, and it really didn't have any traction other than to say don't sign. Um, I learned this too, that everybody has a role, and some people do a whole lot with very little time by, sort of leadership, campaign leadership, and the core group kind of running things. And some people don't do much at all, and they take a lot of time. But everybody has a role. The guy that would come and just have a donut and a cup of coffee and then kind of split when we were going to knock on doors, uh, he added value, and that was new for me to recognize that everybody has a place, whatever their needs are, and also for volunteers when they get engaged, they should do what they want to do and what they can do, as opposed to trying to fit into a role that doesn't work for them. Like if you're not good at talking on the telephone, you don't need to, make phone calls. Maybe there's something else. Maybe you could hand out literature, or maybe just walk with someone else that does it. So there's a role for everybody, which I think is great, a real valuable thing for me to learn. Uh, the when I say that mobilization, the reason that I think D4 coalesced is because they were just damn mad. They were angry and felt that they were lied to, and ultimately, the language became betrayal, that they were betrayed. And betrayal, as a word, is a superlative that it evokes a feeling in people. I can tell you from day one until the results of the recall came out, that hostility, that sense of betrayal and anger never dissipated. They did not, it didn't fade. And it tells me that, I mean, the takeaway here is that that sort of saying enough kept everybody focused. How am I doing? You guys finding this interesting or?
Oh yeah.
Okay, okay, good. Um, anyway, so it's a mobilization driven by passion. And so one of my takeaways is also that, and I think for all of us that worked it, is that if you're going to be in a leadership role in one of these things, you have to have passion for the topic. You have to really feel it. The campaign firms, the various people you hire, they don't feel it. They're basically part of the, political industrial complex that takes money to make this stuff happen, which is a terrain feature. It just is. Uh, so the issue of passion, and then the add-on of public safety. People were experiencing the impacts of the closure of the Great Highway. And when I say Joel, uh, recalled himself, uh, we knew that he had planned to pull Prop K, and then uh, at least Lucas Lux from the Great Highway Closure Support Team, uh, and probably Scott Wiener got to him, and they stabilized things that they were going to stand by him and fund this thing for him. And so he changed his mind and he doubled down. So not only did he, betray his constituents in the beginning by they felt betrayed, that then he starts doing videos at Ocean Beach on the Great Highway talking about how great it is. To me, that was just rubbing salt in the wounds. Um, anyway, I want to talk to you a little about signature gathering. We had we were told early on essentially a price to gather signatures, and it was well over $100,000. Well, we didn't have 100,000. We didn't have 10,000 cents, right? So that wasn't possible. We were told that D4 would not have deep pockets, and that we would not be able to collect signatures by volunteers. The reality is that within about a month of getting to the end of the gathering period, uh, we were pulling up, Lisa, what, 1,500 signatures short, 2,000 from the minimum, uh,
Yeah,
somewhere.
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
The,
So,
the challenge was we hadn't validated, so we had a rough estimate.
right. We hadn't validated along the way, which was a mistake. I think you should
I
validate.
agree.
And now, so the cost to gather signatures initially was, $10 to $15. That was a price quoted to us. But as we got towards the end, these signature gatherers are not unhoused people living in cars that get up and go up to Safeway and make $10 a signature. No, this is a big firm located in Boston that when they get in contract with you, they fly people in, put them up in Airbnbs, train them, and deploy them. By the time we were getting even closer, when we're at I think 10, somewhere $15 to $20 or $10 to $15 a signature, we were told that they were not going to be able to pull it off unless they had more people. And so to close in at the end, it was running us about $35 a signature. It could be a little off, 30 to 35. That's a lot of dough, but we had no choice. And so a twist or two. In the midst of this, part of our leadership team, before we decided to go ahead and, pay the extra money to get the signatures to get us over the hump, uh, he became fearful of losing. And it started to cloud his judgment and was really affecting the campaign. We couldn't advance because there was this stone disagreement, and he felt that we should fold up shop, that it wasn't going to happen. So why go on? Let's save face. Let's be honest. And the consensus was that that no, we were not going to do that. We were going to go ahead, and it was quite a difficult few days. So you want to know what the solution was, which I think is it's almost creepy to me, but it worked out. He wasn't going to leave voluntarily, nor was he going to let us continue. So we decided that he and I should both leave and transition to new leadership for phase two, meaning the campaign to recall after the signatures were gathered. Well, he wouldn't have any part of that either. So I said that I would quit, and that left him holding everything all by himself. And I guess that didn't sit well with him because then he quit within a day. and then we all regrouped and pushed ahead. The point is that it's a complicated world and you don't always know who you're working with. So you have to keep your eyes open as to problems early on. And there were problems early on with this fellow, but I didn't recognize the severity of them. And, I kind of let a couple of things go. And by the time we got to the critical phase, it could have been catastrophic. Luckily, we got through it in great part thanks to Lisa, uh, and also the strategy developed out of that session. Anyway, so we got the signatures, more canvassing. So I want to tell you what the other side was up to. Um, and I think if Joel would have come out in the beginning and and re-engage that community out there with some sense of mea culpa. I really fouled up. Quite honestly, I don't think he has the skill set to be in government office. But he's not a terrible person. He's a sort of an affable. I find him feckless. He's very weak, but there's nothing objectionable about his character. He just I don't think had the skill set to hang on to the levers of government that he had. So here's what he engaged in. Early on, they were trolling on Nextdoor and Facebook and pouncing on anybody who made comments that they didn't find friendly. uh, Social media optimization, so that in a campaign where you'd want robust conversation and let the issues form, you have a group that is paying Google to see that anytime anybody puts in the word Recall Engardio, it's hijacked to their site to keep him in office. Um,
Hmm.
the notion of amplification, the the Joel asked people to put their names on ghost written articles and op-ed pieces. I saw the text, the screenshots, and that's another thing. There's no loyalty in this campaign world. I saw the screenshots where he had said, just get a hold of the campaign, put your name on it, and we'll get it into the local newspaper. Um, the they call it amplification, but it's really taking a very few voices and using them and making them seem like there's more voices out there. We know there were not more voices because of the turnout in the election and Joel not carrying a single precinct in the recall. The best he did is one precinct voted 50-50. Every other precinct in D4 voted to recall him. Uh, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Then there was one of my favorites was Sam Singer, the communications fellow in town. They call him the master of disaster. Uh, he was making $10,000 a month about working on Joel's campaign. And what he would do every morning is call the various media outlets and tell them some story, gin up some story that maybe they'd run with. Um, and I met him at a lunch in the middle of this, and I told him that, when they call me in the morning and ask me to make a comment, I'll say, what did Sam Singer get you chasing your tail again on some ridiculous story? And it kind of worked. They didn't run with his stories after a while. And Sam Singer is another sort of decent fella. He laughed and said, yeah, that's what he does. Um, I didn't like the merchant pressure. How the merchants, like, they'll put up a sign for candidate A and candidate B in the same window? Well, in this case, if we had a sign up, they'd send someone by to pressure the business to take it down. And I think that you shouldn't take advantage of business that way. It just struck me as another sort of creepy tactic. Um, and then they did some background research on one of our main volunteers and pulled up a decades old criminal record out of an East Coast city. And they threw that up on the internet to see if that would cause them trouble. It was so minor, it didn't. Um, so anyway, here are the takeaways before I give it over to Lisa, is that costs a lot of money to run a campaign. we raised about $300,000 to their $900,000. Most of our money was in small donations. It actually you'd well up seeing the number of people that would donate $5 once a month or once every 2 weeks. Uh, I'll bet you there's 50 of them. And then there were the 10 and the $25 ones all over the place, largely from D4. And D1 was very supportive financially for this. Um, we still owe some money beyond the 300K, and money's still dribbling in. The rhetoric in the political world in San Francisco gives honor to the Yiddish notion that a half truth is a whole lie. I just saw that over and over and over again. And, I'm an idealist, and I wasn't born last night, but it just surprises me how far one in politics in San Francisco can take a fact and how much they can infer from it. It long passes the midpoint to the point of being misleading and a lie. So you've talked about false information on the internet and amplification. Um, Disaffected staffers, Joel seemed to let people go pretty quickly from his office and from his campaign staff, and they would reach out to our folks looking for their next gig, basically. And so I think in any campaign to treat the people that work for you well and retain them and select carefully in the beginning because they can create problems for you. I found City Hall really disconnected from the voter until D4 fired Joel Engardio, and now they're waiting to see if it can happen again or whether it can be mobilized on other issues. Um, it's worth mentioning, these groups that have, uh, friends of, let's say, Sunset Dunes and, friends of this and friends of that, and they take positions on, and particularly I noticed it in this campaign, is that they're shell organizations without a volume of people behind them. So they have a spokesperson for an entity, but the entity is void of any people, and it's the same people from entity to entity. It's the same names over and over again. So while they have a voice, it creates a situation where they have a voice and a standing in the conversation, but they have no voting power when it comes to voting. They can sway people, but it wasn't helpful for them in D4. They couldn't turn out votes because it was just the people in D4, not citywide. All I'm saying is that, when you're involved in these things, you have to look behind, the veil of the corporate identity to say, what are they really? Now, I was looking at the Bike Coalition's numbers. In 2010, they had 12,000 members. Today, they have 6,000, and they make more in city contracts than they do from donations. They're probably a well-subscribed organization, but really, when you think of the voice they have on things, does it really represent San Franciscans or a large community? And just another minute or two here. Um, let's see. Uh, there's a class of politicians and largely these sort of wannabe politicians. I found more people that think they can be mayor or supervisor. And my takeaway is that most of them can't. In my sense of what the skill set is. Um, but they get in this frenzied texting and constant communication and rumor and nuanced positions and this and that. So that I think that their world would be very uncomfortable when the music stops. And I guess I bring this up so that, as we look at people running for office, to really take a good close look at what motivates them, what are their positions. Um, you know, uh, the I'm going to digress for a second, but there was this fellow, Stephen Huang, who was his name has been bantered around as being on the short list for the mayor's for the appointment in D4 as the new supervisor. And I didn't know him, but he showed up at that meeting we had recently with the mayor and Scott Wiener out at the Sunset Rec Center. And he was kind of hovering around trying to meet people and engage. And so I saw him kind of hanging near me. And as I was leaving, I just went up and said, "Hey," I introduced myself. I said, "Where are you on the Great Highway and returning to the compromise?" And he goes, "Well, I'm still studying the issue." And I said, I said, if that's your answer, because I think the issue's been studied, if you look at the last two elections, you should probably not unpack your banker's boxes because they'll throw you out of office in June. And so he's not ready with the answers. He's not ready for anything, but he wants to be in this world. So my point is that people deserve our scrutiny and they should be okay with it. And then I guess I'll end on this point is that that you know that feeling when you have a strong feeling about something in your community and how you'd like it to be, and there's lots of other people out there feels the same way because you kind of see telltales in online and in the Richmond Review or Sunset Beacon, and you go, oh, they're out there, people are talking, and that's how I feel too. The solidarity and power comes when you go stand there and lock arms with them. And even though your sentiments are represented by other folks, you're joining in that chorus. My joining, that joining made all the difference. People said to us that they never knew they had so many good-hearted, kind neighbors. One guy said one guy got 500 signatures. He says he never met so many people in his life. And so there you go. Joel, in 2022, there were 26,800 people that voted um, in the election in D4 for supervisor. He got 13,600 votes. In the recall, 21,000, about 5,000 less voted in the recall, and they recalled him by 13,474. So it completely flipped the other way. A 62 to 37, 62 and a half to 37 and a half split on the votes. So I'll end on this.
Okay.
He recalled himself, and the mobilization and the passion of D4 residents drove this outcome. And I think that the West Side is ready for more of this because they've said enough is enough.
Right.
Charles, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to say that, thank you, Richard. But I think before we go over to Lisa, we have two other people that are on the panel too. Lisa said she wanted to speak last. And so
Okay, all right.
I think we should go to one of the other two, to Sandy or to Albert. Albert, do you want to speak first?
Albert, you're muted. Okay, since he isn't answering, let's go with.
Oh,
Sandy.
here I go. Here I
Oh,
go.
there we go.
Sorry, I
Hi.
have a little cute monkey on my back.
Mhm.
Oh,
Okay,
anyway,
well,
hi everybody.
hi, Albert.
Uh, Hi there. Yeah, well, please, which subject you wanted me to speak about? Which part of the experience of the
Well,
recall do you want me to speak about?
What about where you think we're going, how we're going forward after this? What do you see happening?
Oh, I think the biggest challenge. I think the biggest
Well,
challenge is
we can talk about that later, but Richard mentioned merchants. You obviously are president of POPs. So
yes.
maybe you could speak about a merchant's perspective of the recall before we get to later on the aftermath and what's the way forward. Just saying.
I can reiterate a lot of the things that can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can reiterate a lot of the things that Richard has said that, there was a loss of trust in that this, Joel Engardio was not working for us. He was working against us and working with a collective few that had all the voices in his ears, but excluding everybody else. Um, he took, like it was one of the things that he had a pattern of was that he would take credit when things were good and then deflect when things were wrong. A couple examples of that, the Irving Street night market. You know, a lot of us community leaders had already been working on a night market towards the end of Gordon Marr's administration. And so we were already having that idea. It just fell into place that Joel Engardio also wanted to do night markets. So we collaborated. But through all our hard work to get that thing organized and get all the permits and organize all the volunteers and rental spaces, vendors, all the events that went on, including the stage acts and everything. Um, at the end, when the press was shining a light on him, he said he did it, and he didn't give any credit to anybody else, and that really got people pretty mad. And that's why, like, we did a second night market, but we were very skeptical to have him help out. And but a third one, I'll admit it wasn't his fault. That was the one that got on the news on the last cycle. It was just because the city hall took so much time to get us paid that we didn't have enough money to start the third night market on time. Now, he also did something, which was he held a Terraville night market down at the beach. This was during Prop K, and he used that to promote Prop K. He had it towards the beach, and he never even thought to tell us in the Merchants Association that he was going to have a night market on Terraville. So he didn't reach out to any of the merchants. He brought in his own vendors, brought in his own food vendors, and brought in his own entertainment to celebrate, the Great Highway. So I kind of even wonder if that was legal because he was using them, I think, city time and expenses to promote it, and yet did no good for us. It was only for his own. It was only for his own benefit. Another solution, another one that I thought was interesting was like, I don't know if you guys remember, but Terraville Street, we were coming to the end of the Terraville project, and many of us merchants had suffered gravely from all the disruption. Nobody driving up the street, loss of businesses packed up and left. And so at the very end, I did do a merchant mixer at Bering West Restaurant, and he came out, and I had a conversation 2 days before the merchant mixer where Katie Tang told me that there was some APAC money, which was from Biden's APAC event over at Moscone Center. There was a few $1 million around, and Katie Tang and Mayor London Breed had managed to secure $1 million of that and possibly use it to help reimburse or compensate the merchants on Terraville for what they went through. But Katie Tang told me, keep it under your hat. It's not official yet. Well, the night of the merchant mixer on Terraville Street, Joel gets in front of everybody and just blasted the secret to everybody, making a promise that he wasn't even sure it was secured yet. And he made it sound like he did it. So I can tell you from a merchant's perspective, he wasn't really helping us at all. And he would, like, again, say he would take the credit when he could, and again deflect when it wasn't going his way. And then you were mentioning about Sunset and how people would come together. I think that it's important to find someone that can talk to both sides at this point. Politicians come and go, but at the end of the day, we in the community remain. And so we are the ones that are left picking up the pieces, whether we like it or not. So I think that's what has to happen. I think that's what has to happen. That's what has to be done for whoever the supervisor is. They have to try to unite the neighborhood instead of keeping us factionalized as Joel has done for all of us. And I've never seen anything like that in the Sunset. We've always gotten along. So this is sad to me, and I think it's unsustainable. If we can't get back together, then the Sunset can't the vibe that what we love and why we're here will begin to degrade. So that's kind of my opinion about that. And I'm open to other questions if anyone has it.
Okay, we're not going to questions yet. We're-
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
I'll speak first, and then we'll go to Q&A after that. So, Sandra?
Yes, hi. I think most people know me. I'm Sandra Fewer. I have lived in the Richmond district since 1959. I'm 68 years old. I was on a school board for 2 terms, and then I also was the D1 supervisor from 2017 into 2021. So everything that Rich is talking about, like, I've done it a couple of times. And I just want to say what is really impressive, though, about this vote, this campaign, was that they beat big money. And lately in San Francisco, we haven't been able to beat big money. I feel like big money has taken over our elections, not only nationally, but locally. San Francisco used to be somewhat of a bubble, but you have an influx of so much money, you just can't fight it. And so I think what was so amazing and wonderful about this is that it's a coalition of people coming together for a common cause, although, it's about hating the supervisor, but still demanding sort of a voice, their own voice in their neighborhood. They were living there for a reason, because they liked their neighborhood. They could live in the Mission, or they could live other places, but they chose to live in D4. And there's a reason why, because D4 is a certain kind of community, has a certain kind of culture. And so I think it was a big surprise to them. I think that these billionaires who throw in money, who don't even live in D4, quite frankly, we don't even know if they live in San Francisco, that they're able to flood this campaign with like money, and yet don't have a personal stake in it. And so what we see, I feel like, was so sort of, I think, overwhelmingly uplifting, was that I went out to mobilizations, and I also knocked on doors, and my husband got 5 pages of signatures. He's really used to getting those, because he was my #1, fan. And so the fact that regular people went out, and that regular people are knocking on doors, and that regular people are telling neighbors. And I have a girlfriend that lives in a Sunset, and she said her neighbor knocked on every door on her block and then went and reminded them to vote. And this is that type of energy that we have not seen for a while. I think that we felt a little deflated in our neighborhoods, and that we are losing somewhat control over, we on the West Side, I think we feel, and that City Hall does a lot of stuff to us and never with us. I mean, MTA is the perfect example. I think that everything that we get, we have to fight for. I think some of I fought for our water suppression system, and that was fight after fight after fight after fight for the West Side to keep us safe. And quite frankly, if we don't have that, we will burn. But City Hall, downtown, the financial district, their whole fire protection thing, it looks like a Black Widow spider web. They have so much protection down there, but out here on the West Side, we have very little. And yet we have some of the oldest homes, wood framed, living close together. If we have a big fire, we do not have the water pressure to protect us. And yet City Hall, what are they doing? They're really not doing anything for us. And so I feel like we've always had to fight for everything. This upzoning thing doesn't really surprise me, because when I was at City Hall, I felt my main thing was fighting against this type of extension. When I talked to Willie Brown, he said, if I was mayor, I would have done 50,000 units all along Gary Boulevard, all the way to the beach. And then I was thinking, oh, thank God you're not here. So I think that going forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about going forward, because I think I'm very encouraged by this. I think that they think we're sleepy and they think we're quiet, but we are sort of the bellwether of what happens in these elections in San Francisco. The Richmond is very different than the Sunset. The Richmond is about 63% renters, where it's sort of the reverse in the Sunset, which is about 60% homeowners. And so, but we have a common, I think, enemy here, and that is this blanket upzoning and really destroying our neighborhoods without really a lot of our input in it. So I think that some of us might differ in opinion politically. For example, Yes, I was one to start to build a 100% affordable housing on Gary that was 7 stories. That is 100% affordable housing for seniors because I saw in my neighborhood so many seniors being evicted and also suffering from fires and just being pushed out of their homes that I have known for like 40 and 50 years. So I was really happy to do that. People on this panel might say 7 story building, not in my neighborhood, but that's not the issue here. We can have those arguments later. The issue is, do we really want to have 8 story buildings all along Gary Boulevard without anyone's having a say in it at all? And this is wrong. And I think in order for our neighborhoods on the west side to survive, we have to work together as a coalition. We've been quiet for too long. Now they know we could be a really, I think, a powerful voting force, and this is what they're looking at. And D2, we're looking at moving in D2. We see D1, it's a big issue there, and Connie Chan is our champion. And then we see D4 and we see D7, and we see parts of D11 also. And so if we can work together in a coalition on the west side, we can have a say in this. We can actually be very powerful. We can actually turn this thing around. Look, I'm going to be honest. I think it passed. It went out of committee. Thank you, Myrna Melgar. It went out of committee and it's going to the board for the first vote. And then it'll go for a second vote. And that fucker's going to pass. Just FYI. We are going to lose that. But it's not the end of the game. And this is why, because all of us together have a voice. And the fact that this is really not a plan, you know, this upzoning is really not a plan. What will they build? What will they be required to build? Is it just 1 bedrooms and studios? Or is it 2 and 3 bedrooms for families? Where is the affordability put in there? Where are the protections for tenants? In my neighborhood, 63% of them are tenants. And so where's the protection for the small businesses? It is not a plan to just say we will upzone the west side of San Francisco. A real plan is really about what will it actually really look like. And so we don't want to leave that up to developers, and we don't want to leave that up to the people at City Hall that don't even live out here. We want that to be a voice from all people on the west side. And I'm in D1. I don't speak for D1 people too. And I'm don't live in D4. I am, full transparency, a property owner in D4. But I do think that what D4 wants may be very similar to what D1 wants. But I want D4 to decide what they want for their neighborhood. And I want D1 to decide what they want for their neighborhood, because D4 and D1 are different communities. And D2 is a whole different community. And then we got D7, that's a whole different ball game. So I want them to be able to decide about this place in which they have chosen to call their home. Like what do they envision for it for the future? And what do they like about it? And what do they want to keep? And what can we preserve? And what can we save while perhaps we grow some? And, I'm sort of big on affordable housing. If I could build more senior affordable housing, I would in my neighborhood. I think that when we look at who is aging, the largest population in the Richmond, the largest growing population are seniors. And so that would be my preference. And so, but I do want D4 to be able to decide on their own. They won this on their own. I mean, we helped to do one, and other people helped too. But D4 deserves to have a leader that listens to them. D4 deserves to have a leader that does not lie to them. D4 deserves to have a leader that follows through with promises and also listens to the community, because this is the place where they call home. And that is the most important thing. Thanks.
Okay, Lisa, over to you.
Sure. You're a hard act to follow, Sandra. I like everything you say. I was scribbling notes furiously. I totally agree. I mean, I had the pleasure, and also it was, campaigns are like a war. I mean, you're really kind of in a war. And I had the good fortune of working with with Richard and Jamie and Otto and Forrest through this. And it was, everything that Richard said was just, right on the money, in terms of, the important things and the things that we learned. And some of the things that I really, really treasure is how inclusive the campaign was. I think Richard mentioned that there was a role for everyone. And I really felt like that was really, really true. And I've lived in the district for 21 years, and it's also always been kind of a quiet, sleepy, almost suburban like feel. And it really hadn't really organized in a way that exercised any political muscle. And I think that was something that was something that I saw was rare and kind of a rare moment that we came together. There were some challenging moments we had. Campaigns are really hard. We had super dedicated people. We had lots of neighboring districts and even neighboring municipalities that came and volunteered and donated and gave money. And, we really saw that, this resonated with people. It resonated, it was a really big tent. It resonated across the political spectrum. We had people that were, as far left as you could be. We had people, to the right. I mean, we had people that really, felt like they wanted representation from their, from their leader. Many were brought into it because of their anger around the closure of the Great Highway, or how Prop K came on the ballot. Um, I think it is, so I think it just historic in its grassroots nature, how we were able to pull it off. I mean, there was some key inflection points Richard mentioned, decisions that we made along the way. I mean, I think in some of those cases we felt like you know, uh, we should have made decisions earlier or had a different timing, but we were able. I think the core group of us really saw a path to victory that, we really wanted to push forward, and we did, and we're glad that we did. Um, it's hard going up against big money, and I think that's true. We're still climbing, clawing our way out of debt. Um, um, I reflect on a couple things. I think the media tried to make it that recalls were too easy, that somehow these ordinary people just pulled it off. And so it's really easy if you can buy a recall, and you can organize in a way, that Joel raised almost $1 million. I mean, we were really up against big dollars, and it's really hard when you have people like uh, Chris Larson, who can write $100,000 check, and and I think, the folks in D4 and D1 and all across really, really stood there with us. Um, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of, some of our, Sandra, I'm going to expand on a few things you talked about as well. I think there is a real opportunity here now that we've organized and found some political power. And I think that um, it's really, I think, been instructive for people out here on the west side in particular. I think we've been largely ignored by City Hall, and I think we were actually okay with that because they sort of left us alone. I think we could sort of tolerate the abject neglect at times. Um, but I think now that they're coming in and doing things like closure of the Great Highway, upzoning, I think people really are not happy with being quiet. And so I think now that folks recognize that we can organize and actually do things that are in our collective work together, can really rattle some cages. I think we realize we're much more powerful together. And I do think that there are some lessons learned there. I think we were largely issues based, not so much political identity, but really around common issues. In this case, the common enemy, unfortunately, was we didn't like our current supervisor and how he was governing. Now I think it's things like upzoning. Do we have adequate, infrastructure like emergency needs, like AWSS? are we happy with our, other, our public safety around, whether it's, adequate police staffing or how green space is managed. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues we can kind of center on together, um, uh, that we could use this political capital to actually impact some change and force some change at City Hall. And it's actually kind of the next logical thing that I'm trying I'm talking with some West Side community leaders and seeing if we can organize an issues-based coalition that's focused on issues for the West Side, that is multi-district, and inclusive in nature. Let me move to upzoning, which I think is kind of the current plan. How many of you have had, I've read through the planning and zoning package, which is 1,125 pages. It's pretty onerous. It's also not a well-written, in my opinion, a well-written piece of legislation. It's meant, I think, to be confusing and cumbersome. It's not really organized in a way that's bookmarked or easily navigatable. There are some real landmines in here. So I think, you know, I'd encourage you, and if you don't have it, I can send out the links. The two commissioners in particular gave some very good remarks. Catherine Moore and
Yeah.
Gilbert gave some really good remarks when it went to planning and zoning on September 11th. They were actually two of the three no votes at the Planning Commission, and I think their remarks are worth listening to. And they're one of them, Catherine Moore, she's an architect and an urban planner. She feels that this plan is not a plan. She thinks it's too broad and too that it should be more tailored, similar to how many European cities have evolved and how they protect and honor their history and their culture, but expand and for growth. And I think her comments and Mr. Gilbert's are worth listening to. How many have been to the interactive maps and have looked at those? Yeah, most of you have. I'm gonna share and kind of just talk about some of the things that I've found that I feel are concerning to me when I look at them. Let me see. Can you see the map? Okay. So one of the things that I've looked at, and I don't know if other folks have kind of looked at it into this. I'm going to zoom in. Whoops, sorry, it's going to turn around here. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So I'm in District 4, and I'm going to zoom in. And I think one of the things that I noticed that is a little bit concerning to me is, um, and is that we've talked about the corner lot legislation, but if you actually look at um, sort of the map and you blow it up a little bit, um, this is Judah, which is a transit corridor. And if you blow this up, it doesn't just affect the houses the lots that are on Judah. It actually extends back, sometimes as many as 4 parcels in. And so it's this that really concerns me, that developers could actually start to grab up these end caps of the blocks. And so that starts to get in and encroach into the neighborhood space, which really then changes the character of the neighborhood. And so if you look on Judah Street, for example, this particular zoning, and this is before state density bonus, is up to 85 feet. So that's 8 stories. And so if you can imagine, if market conditions were favorable, if rents go high enough, and this goes from 7th Avenue out to the beach, basically. So this could be a tunnel of 8-story buildings before you get density bonus. And when you talk about density bonuses, it's really around the base height. So the base height becomes important, and it can be 1.8 times that. So these base heights have now increased. They propose them to increase to 50 feet So now you're getting, your taller buildings, you're now going to get, much, much taller buildings that builders can get. So this is some of the things that concern me, in terms of when I look at this map and what changes it can make to our neighborhood. And you look at, this has some impact along, views. Whoops, I'm sorry. It has impact in our commercial districts along Noriega, which is going to have significant impacts to commercial corridors, as well as in the Richmond along Gary. And I know we have several small business owners on the call that are along these corridors. And so I find that this is pretty troubling changes. And I think a lot of these businesses are really, they're neighborhood businesses. They're really tied to a location. And so I think the location, it's really, I feel like we're being gaslit when we're told that they're going to offer neighborhood protections, when even for, and I'm going to look at Albert, for example, even when they did the Terraville, the Terraville, Terraville Muni upgrade, merchants were really not taken care of. So I guess I don't feel like, I don't feel confident that they're putting in significant or really thinking through what those protections look like for small business owners, and how that's going to impact them and their ability to, to stay in business and to return and be part of the community, as they are now. I want to talk a little bit about the coastal zone, and this is another area that it affects both, District 1 and District 4. So this blue or turquoise line is the coastal zone. So if you go to the layers of the map, you can add these different things on here, and there's ways to even expand this out to click on and find different parts of the map. So what I've got here is the coastal zone. And so this was something that when I first read the legislative code, it wasn't until I got to page 818 of an 1125 page document. And it was the Western Shoreline Area Plan. And I know there's folks on here that probably have more understanding legally, and maybe some, that are lawyers here that may have studied this more than I have. And I'd encourage folks to please chime into this discussion. When I brought this up I had a meeting with folks from the mayor's office with Han Zhao, and I brought this up to him that this was really, what I noticed at the time was that the language that protects the development and prevents development in the Western Shoreline area, all of that language had been struck out, and it was replaced with language that said, we're going to allow development that's, in line or commensurate with the local zoning. So effectively, they're creating a local zoning ordinance in this coastal zone area, which is something that we've really pushed back on for decades. And so, and Scott Wiener's been trying to get this into his portfolio for a while. He put in SB 951 and tried to take this area out of the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission. Aaron Peskin was, as the board president, put forward a resolution. I believe it was a year ago, in March of 2024, and pushed back. And the Board of Supervisors voted 8-3 in favor of the resolution, which was to oppose SB 951. Wiener then rescinded that part of the legislation, supposedly because of public backlash. I can't prove this, but I think it's because he found another way, and that other way was Prop K, to try to close the Great Highway to create this park, which I really feel is a set piece in developing this area. So what I told Han Zhao was this was a bright line for folks in District 4, and I assumed it would be in District 1 as well for West Side residents, and that they should restore this language, that they should strike the proposed changes and restore this language that protected the Western shoreline. I had an opportunity to meet with a small group with Mayor Lurie and asked him about protections to the coast, and said, you know, you've commented before that you're not going to turn Ocean Beach into Miami Beach. However, you know, we can debate whether that's hyperbolic, but however, and if you zoom in on this map, and I'll try to get over here a bit more, there's at least 10 parcels throughout the western, or throughout the coastal zone. There's some here at the end of Judah, which are part of that extension we talked about, that go up to 85, or sorry, these go up to 100 and, sorry, this is 85 feet. The ones at the bottom of Sloat actually are taller, and this is before state density bonuses, so sorry. These are down here at Wawona and Sloat, so by the zoo. And then there's also some up by Balboa that are also within this coastal zone that are also quite, are high rises, basically. Sorry. Right in here, Cabrillo. And also along Fulton. And so when I asked Mayor Lurie, would like this restored, we like that protective language restored, and can you remove these parcels within the within your upzoning plan, because your upzoning plan does include these. And there was resistance there to do that. And in fact, he said, we can revisit it next year. And I said, well, but next year, you've said that this is irreversible. And he said, well, we have a planning process, but we all know how that goes. Once you have a 110-story building, it's easier to have the next one and the next one. And that's really how Miami Beach starts, is one building at a time. And I think we could all appreciate that these might be prime real estate pieces for developers to try to focus in on, which I think could have really deleterious effects for the Western shoreline. At the October 6th meeting, where Senator Wiener was there, he made a comment that he thought the coastal zone was too large, that part of it actually included neighborhoods. And so I think this is an area that he's been really focused on. So I haven't asked for people here. There's still time to make comments, to submit written comments to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And so if this is something that's of concern to people, this or any part of the upzoning plan, I would encourage you to submit comments to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. Also, tomorrow night, there's a DCCC meeting. It's at Pomeroy Center. There's 2 resolutions that are on the agenda around upzoning. There is an opportunity for public comment. It's the public comment period is before the resolutions are heard, so that's agenda item number 5. The meeting starts at 6:30, so it would be relatively early in the meeting, and there'll be 2 minutes per speaker. The 2 resolutions, the first one is put forward by Michael Chen and Nancy Tung, and it's in support of the family zoning plan. The second resolution is put forward by former Supervisor Gordon Marr, and it's to oppose Mayor Lurie's family zoning plan without amendments. And so I would encourage you, I can, Charles and Deborah, I'm happy to send you the documents for these, if that would be helpful, and the information for folks to both submit comments to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. Also encourage folks to show up to the Pomeroy Center tomorrow night to provide comments. I think it's important to get on the record for these things and to make sure that we're heard. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's questions that folks have.
Yes, please send the information. I will go to the meeting tomorrow night.
Okay. And then one more comment just to say, and just to kind of put a plug in. I mean, one of the things that I'm working and I'm working, talking with some community leaders and different folks within the D1 and D4 and D7. Again, we're trying to bring in as big a tent as possible, but I think um, uh, forming this West Side Coalition, I think there's a number of issues we have. I think we've shaken things up a bit um, uh, in the city, and I want to continue to kind of push for things that we feel that we've we need resolution on. I'm going to share one more thing because it's something I did want to talk about. It's 'cause something I've been actually in discussions over the last few weeks, and I think I made comments on this yesterday to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. One of the things that I feel that we're doing things really getting the cart before the horse, and that's really on infrastructure needs. And I know a lot of people, when they hear about infrastructure, they think about transportation and drinking water and things that are obviously are important. There's some other emergency services and infrastructure things and that we're missing. What I've pulled up now is this is the current auxiliary water supply system, which is the AWSS. So just to give a little bit of history here, this was put in after the 1906 earthquake. And so, um, and it was put in with urgency. It was put in between 1908 and 1913. So they did it in 5 years because they had seen the dangers that had happened and the fires, the out of control fires and conflagrations that happened during the 1906 quake. And so because it was built in 1908 through 1913, this is where the populace really lived at the time. So they covered the city where the people resided, and it's not really been expanded much since then. And it was done with a lot of really good engineering that really is still elegant today. And it uses the salt water that's on three sides of San Francisco. So it's really brilliant in that it's separate and distinct from the municipal water system. And it's still functioning and quite brilliant in its design. It's got redundancy. It's you can actually, because it's got sufficient pressure, you can hook up to any hydrant without a tank, without a fire truck. I mean, it's got, some brilliance around it. Unfortunately, it's not been extended. So if you can see that, Sea Cliff, the Richmond, Sunset, the southern neighborhoods, Bayview, Hunters Point are not protected. So this is an issue that has had three bond measures, 2010, 2014, 2020, two civil grand juries. The recommendations from both civil grand juries were expand the AWSS, do it urgently. In 2010, the system was transferred from the fire department to PUC. PUC hired an engineering firm who scoped out what it would take to expand the AWSS. It was going to be $600 million. And one of the consultants from the firm had a quote anonymous. They don't know who made it, but somebody from the PUC said that's not going to happen. A management oversight committee of 4, they were not an official committee. They have no transparency, but they decided how to spend the bond money. Two of the four were Harlan Kelly and Muhammad Nuru. So we kind of know where they are now, which is in prison. The other two were the fire chief and a spokesperson from PUC. So I think we have, this is one of the issues I think you're going to start hearing a bit more about, because we're going to start pressing on issues like this as issues for the West Side. So anyway, I'm gonna stop talking and see if there's, like, I've lost everybody, or if their eyes have glazed over or not.
And we have a question. Thomasita, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Well, it's not a question. If you don't mind, I would just like to offer some information. First of all, I own a building on La Playa and Irving, the beautiful bright green apartment building with the chartreuse with a pink and turquoise, the Victorian everybody loves. Okay, it's a liquefaction zone and it's a tsunami zone. So to be building, in fact, just putting the elders that are going to be put on that 8-story building on the kitty corner on the next block, 1, 2, 3, 4, lower grade highway is, what are seniors going to do in an earthquake, or they call for a tsunami zone? I mean, it's ridiculous to be building anything along the tsunami zone, and it's the entire lower grade highway is tsunami zone. And a friend of mine used to work in the planning office within Ed Lee's office, and he happened to notice that high rises can be built. It's easier, he feels, and he wrote a paper on it, which I'd be glad to share. It's not specific, but well, that if you want to build a high rise across the street from a highway, there's a lot more laws that apply, including the coastal zones and stuff. But if you want to build a high rise across the street from a park, a whole lot of those regulations go away. So he feels that the whole reason behind this, calling it a rush to call it a park, this is all about laying the ground for the developers to come in and build high rises. And in his paper, like I said, I would like it for everybody to read it. He points out that in New York and in other 2 other cities that he gives examples of, they created a park, but then it completely gentrified. It ended up gentrifying the neighborhood, driving out the locals. And so I would like to share that with you. But I had one more point I wanted to share, and that is to Richard, and that is that I don't know how many people know this, but Wynn at one point mentioned that Lucas was the treasurer of the Bicycle Coalition.
Yes.
And I think that a lot more should have been made out of that, because of something that I wish I had the skill to research, but I was witness and did write a paper, article for El Tecolote about it. My point is the influence, the totally extraordinary and undue influence that the Bicycle Coalition has in setting city policy. And it's for example, City College. City College is the key to a better life for thousands of working class people. And the Bicycle Coalition is obsessed with getting, making people who need cars to suffer. And they don't understand that people who are real true working class people have a very strong need to get from one place to the other, because they don't have a lot of spare time. And so they might be balancing, a job and a family. And
Okay,
they only
Thomasita, I want to thank you for your comments, but we have a limited amount of time and there's other questions. So
okay.
we'll go.
I just hope that people will investigate
Yes.
how much money truly the Bicycle Coalition gets, and how they're influencing.
And we're going to go on to George's question next.
Thank you. Thomasita, I think a lot of people knew that Lucas Lux was the treasurer for the Bicycle Coalition. But my real question to all the panelists, who I think did a great job, by the way, very well spoken, would be to Lisa. And Lisa, you're talking about organizing a group across the city, basically. And you're talking about talking to neighborhood leaders. And we're a group right now at CSFN who are neighborhood leaders. And one of the things I wanted to know is, how do you get on the list to work with you? Because a lot of us, I personally, listening to you, agreed with you. I agreed with Albert. and I think with Robert, all of you. So the next step would be to become more powerful against our own representatives. So, as neighbors, so how do we form this group you're talking about?
Well, I mean, we're in early discussions right now, and I'm kind of figuring that out as I go. And you know, I know I've Richard and I have talked about it a bit, and several folks in D1 and D7. So I'm actually looking for as much help as I can get. So if you're interested, George, you know, or anyone here, I'd love to have you on board. There's a lot of work to do. I mean, I have a lot of ideas and want to bounce a lot of ideas off of people how to organize and how we keep people engaged. I mean, I think it's you know, it's a little bit. I think you know, there's probably going to be a little bit of people, you know, dealing with a little bit of managed chaos or controlled chaos because I think we're going to have a lot of things going on at once. I've been meeting, you know, today I spent a lot of time meeting talking about a strategy around this auxiliary water supply system, you know, and there's many branches of that. Like there's a communication strategy, a political strategy, probably even a legal strategy that we have to put in place. And so I'm forming these little kind of, you know, my idea is sort of forming these little focus groups or hubs that are part of, you know, a larger coalition, but they can actually focus on driving some things forward, but we can cross support and help each other. So like if there's, you know, a need for folks to organize to come together for a rally or to contact your local officials, that we have a group of people we can call upon that can mobilize and help. You know, there's going to be opportunities where we need folks to you know, to help us with media, you know, to write letters to the editor, to start to get you know, some of this is going to be making noise and really making City Hall know what's important to us. And we have to figure out, you know, how do we, you know, in some cases it's like yourselves, it's working with small neighborhood groups, supporting them, you know, filling in some of the gaps that they may have. Sometimes it's us going to be taking the lead on things. So I think all those things are you know, uh, we're you know kind of forming that right now.
Okay, well, I have a
Thank you.
pre-submitted question, and then we're going to go to Dave. And this is from Eileen. If the city is willing to stand up to Trump about sending National Guard troops to San Francisco, why is the city unwilling to stand up to HCD?
Could I take that one?
Yes.
Because they're if we're talking about upzoning here, the state, in concert with politicians, some of whom are not in office anymore, have devised this plan that somehow, if we don't upzone, the state will do it for us, and it's worse. And if it were good public policy, you wouldn't try and spin a false dilemma. We don't have any energy in city government, either at the city attorney's office or the mayor's office, pushing back against Sacramento. What they're saying is, you know, let me punch you in the face because they're going to hit you over the head with a stick. And I'm saying there's more options than that, and there really are. But you know, the mayor's talking points have been um, family zoning. As far as I can tell, it is the family of developers who benefit by this and people that own wrecking balls. Uh, and so the name itself is a little false. And then this idea that, you know, even the union guys I know who I'm friendly with say, oh, yeah, whoa, you got to do it or they're going to do it to you. It just doesn't. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, and it's weak public policy. I said to the mayor himself 2 weeks ago, um, if so many people, when you're talking hundreds of thousands of people affected on the west side and northwest side of San Francisco, many of whom are uncomfortable and anxious and worried. Is this public policy ready for prime time in an 1,100-page tome? And his answer was basically, well, yes. Just stuffing it down our throats. And I think that all of us say there's room for density. The question is where, and a more thoughtful approach. I don't know. I hope that.
Dave, you're next.
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering if the panelists could comment on strategies for one, researching, and two, responding to the big money, which is an issue I think we share all over town. You know, it used to be, it seems like the downtown building owners and the developers would funnel their money through lobbyists. But now you have these big check tech guys. So how do you research their money, where it's coming from, and how do you turn it around on them?
Well, their disclosures at the ethics department in San Francisco. You'd go on and you find their latest filings, and in there are going to be, who donated money, and at the state also. In campaigns, it's very crystal clear. It's funny, the little person has to report where the donuts came from. Ask Lisa, we'd buy coffee and donuts, and it became an issue of a like-kind donation that had to get reported, whereas gazillions of dollars are coming in from all over the state that we knew. I'll say this though, at least in D4, the big money coming in inured to Joel's detriment. These are people that didn't know the Great Highway from Great Neck, New York. They just knew that Scott Wiener wanted to direct some money towards Joel or developers or some other constituency. But the point is, it's fairly ascertainable. I think that the people in D4, it being D4 centric, took umbrage at the big money, the Stoppelman money, the other folks that gave hundreds of thousands of dollars. On a citywide basis, we don't seem to get as upset about it. And I think that's an area to think about, pointing out and reminding folks. We can say D1 and D4 are not for sale, but we've had a tougher time saying San Francisco isn't for sale because it appears to be for sale.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that too, that I think there's supposed to be some legislation this year that's coming in for the Board of Supervisors to actually increase the limits to candidates from 500 to 1,000. I actually think they should put the limits down, keep them at 500, but make them for everybody. We didn't have contribution limits for this type of issue. And I think had there been that, and Chris Larson's 500 was the same as somebody else's 500, it would have evened out because we actually had more individual donors than Joel did. So we actually would have fared better. And I think when there was a panel at Manny's about recalls, and Joe Eskenazi was like, well, recalls are too easy. Well, they're easy if you can fund them at the rate that they're funding them. I mean, that's really what was the problem. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay, Glenn, you're next.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, could I get your email addresses, all of you folks that are speakers, so that we might be able to make comments to you in the future?
Sure.
Put it in the chat, or is it going to be available through the CSFN?
I'll put mine in the chat.
Thank you.
I'll put mine in the chat.
Thank you.
Sandra, did you have a question?
I had a comment, and I just wanted people to, first, I wanted to also say a little bit about the fundraising or the monies that are involved in campaigns. A lot of times campaigns can only raise so much. It's really the independent expenditures that kick our ass. It is, that is no limit. You can donate as much as you want. Like regular folk can just donate $500, right? But independent expenditures, like that's where the big money comes in. And when I was running against Marjan Philhauer, I mean, at one point she raised, fundraised me 28 to 1. And that is this independent expenditure. So they will have these organizations and people put money into it. And then, it's really about the independent expenditures, quite frankly. I mean, you can see who's donated to campaigns, but then you really have to sometimes follow the money to find out really how these independent expenditures are really being funded and by whom. And so I think that is an added, if you have somebody, I think, on the team that can do it. There's some people who are very good at this and they're used to doing it. Aaron Peskin is brilliant at it. Is that able to find out, oh, that person, yeah, they threw down 5 million, and it's sort of unbelievable about these billionaires in San Francisco that actually want to run our city using their money. So, but then I also just want to say about what Lisa mentioned about the fire suppression system, which I really worked on, and included the sunset also, by the way, when it wasn't sort of included before. I was fighting for my district, but also included the sunset, and at that time also included part of the sea cliff. But they have chiseled away at that money. And I originally won $205 million to start that project. And then it got whittled away. And again, once again, not a commitment to the Richmond, but quite frankly, if they want to build out on the west side, we don't have, you might see regular fire hydrants on your corners. That will put out the fire of one home. But when you have 3 homes, you will need that water suppression system to put out those big fires. And that is what we will see in an earthquake in San Francisco. And then I also want to mention about the tsunami zone. In my district, there was a tsunami zone, and no one even told me until I asked. And then there is a 100% affordable senior housing development right in the tsunami zone, and the city is ill prepared to evacuate them, and they're almost all Russian speaking. So the tsunami zone in the Richmond goes up to 47th Avenue. So they told all these people on walkers, so get up to high ground, walk up to 47th, and they just said, how I'm going to get there. So the lack of preparedness, if they want to build on the coast, is like crazy. Another thing, it is a tsunami zone, for God's sake, and it's just completely dangerous. And also, we don't have a fire suppression system. There isn't in the Richmond. There isn't those high pressured fire hydrants past 12th Avenue. And then I just want to mention another thing is that I think most of us know that there are 70,000 parcels in the pipeline that are ready to be built right now. I don't know if you remember, but the big fight about Park Merced, it went hundreds of people protesting, blah, 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 blah. Maximus got the permit to build. That's what, 15 years ago. It's just sitting there. Developers say, well, I'm not going to make my profit margin, so I'm not going to build. But in the meantime, they're holding that property hostage. And so there is another way to meet this mandate. There is a way to say to developers, you either build within 6 months or you sell that thing. And if they did that now, you could have that housing in 6 years, quite frankly. And if they refuse to do that, eminent domain, because it is a state of emergency now. So we are looking at big parcels, Schledge Lock. What is that? 30 years that they've held on to that property and have not built on it. It is not fair. And instead of really coming down on these developers that are just holding the property because they can and holding us hostage because they will not build, that they are coming out to the west side. So no one has really addressed that yet. And so there is an option to do something about that. We can actually take it over as eminent domain if we really want to get serious about it. But don't come out here on the west side and start all this zoning of 14-story buildings and everything without a fire suppression system, but also without first demanding that those people who actually own that property right now and went through all the permitting, they are ready to build tomorrow, to break ground tomorrow, will not do so because they are not going to make their 20% whatever profit margin. So I think there are options here. And that's why I say that even though we're going to lose it at the Board of Supervisors because we don't have the, the people in place to actually do the right thing, is that there are other options, I think, that the city has not looked at. And actually, every time we come to a forum and we ask them about it, they sort of poo-poo it. But in my opinion, I think that this is serious. These developers that have been allowed to just hold on to these property for decades, when they keep saying we need housing, we need housing, we need housing, but not forcing them to build. This is completely in cahoots with the big developers and big money. Okay, now I'm going to shut up.
Okay, Lisa, you're next, and then George.
I was just going to say, Sandra, I'm going to talk to you because I think there's a strategy to get to 6 no's on the Board of Supervisors, but I'm going to need some help. I think it's a fight worth having. I think it's tricky, but it might be doable.
Okay, George, you're next.
Very quickly, there are 70,000 permits. Supposedly they expire after 3 years. However, they're automatically approved and nobody looks at them again. Sandra is absolutely correct. On the AWSS, what they're doing on the west side is they're no longer building Kubota piping, which was supposed to be the high pressure piping that they use in Japan. They've changed the system and they're now using cisterns, and they're trying to link long hoses to pump station fire trucks, and then they would be the new high powered pressure through the West. And this has all the earmarks of failure. And I don't see why we don't have the same quality as other districts in the city. And definitely the west side of San Francisco will burn. That's my last comment. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Lisa, you still.
Yeah, I can respond to that one a little bit, George, and I'll send this information to Deborah and Charles so they can distribute it. There's a really good there's quite a bit of information. Tom Dudier and Frank Blackburn put together a lot of it. So did Nancy Werfel. Both Nancy passed a few years ago. She was an excellent researcher out of D4. And Frank Blackburn just passed about 3 weeks ago. But Tom has been continuing to push this forward. What you mentioned is true. When the system was transferred from the fire department to PUC in 2010, the fire department has not extended, or the PUC has not extended the AWSS. They've actually, as far as we know, they've been using the money to improve the water system, the municipal water system. And actually, this is a really failed strategy, and it's a bad strategy. So, in my real life, I mean, I was trained as a chemical engineer and come from a science and engineering background. And Tom and I have talked about this, and it's just a really bad idea. For one, it doesn't provide the coverage it needs that AWSS would provide. Plus, you're using potable water. And so they have come up with a number of pretty crazy and flawed ideas that have been abandoned. And to our knowledge, they haven't come up with a new system. But what you're talking about is they were going to use the municipal water system and use our potable water supply. And so they were going to use the Lake Merced reservoir, which we would only have access to a third of that, which would be about 86 million gallons, which would not provide enough volume or pressure for the amount of fires that they think they're going to have in the Sunset and Richmond. And so their answer to that was, well, we can just refill it from Hetch Hetchy water, which would take 24 hours. Now, just a reminder of folks how they haven't really thought this through. First of all, fire's not going to wait for 24 hours. What are you going to do? And secondly, you have to transport it across 3 fault lines. And so, we don't know if that will actually be, if that will be available. And you could only have enough water to pressurize 3 hydrants. or to fight off, a handful of the fires you think you're going to have. So 3 out of, say, 20 or 40 fires that you're going to have. So there's a problem with that. And then George, you were mentioning they had this idea that, well, we can just use these 12-inch diameter hoses. And I think Aaron actually reminded them, well, you guys realize the Sixth Army is no longer at the Presidio. Like, how are you going to get them, there? Where are they? And they said, NERT volunteers can drive the trucks. And Aaron said, I'm a NERT volunteer. And his legislative aide said, I'm a NERT volunteer. And then they kind of realized how absurd this system. So they abandoned that plan. But and they, this is why you're going to hear a lot more about fire protection and AWSS, because we want to get this resolved. Anyway, I'll stop. I could talk about this for a while. So.
And George, did you have another question?
Well, not a question, a comment, really. I know I'm taking up too much time, but the other thing that's wrong with this, it's becoming corrupt in that Stonestown, Brookside had a deal with the city to have EWSS water, and they within 7 blocks they could have, for all the units they were building, they could have attached it to, but it would have cost $10 million. Rather than do that, they spent $2 million for tanker trucks from Lake Merced, with a wink and a nod from the fire department. And this is going on all through the west side of San Francisco. So we're getting a second-rate protection system now, which isn't as bad as no protection, but it's certainly not what we deserve, especially because of the property taxes we're paying. Thank you.